Okay, we want to go ahead and start and talk a little bit about this whole mechanical trainer here. Now, I'm going to come around behind you and take a look at what we have. Generally, we're going to be using a motor. This isn't the only motor we're going to use, but we are going to be using this whole setup right here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the tools and equipment that go along with it. And I'm going to show you how to kind of set this stuff up very quickly. So let's dive into it. Now, first thing you should know is that these rails are universal, and that is wonderful because you can put almost anything anywhere you want to put it. All you need is a few of these special nuts here. Now these special nuts are designed specifically to slide right into this aluminum extrusion. Now you'll notice that on here there is a little bit of a protrusion at the bottom. That's going to go downward. So if you want to take this and slide it in just like that, it doesn't matter if it's going in this direction or going in this direction, but rather that protrusion section right here is going to be down. So we're going to slide that in, and we can move this over to wherever we need to bolt something up, and then we're going to need to bolt something down with, let's say, a particular bolt. Okay, so these bolts right here, most of them are all the same thread. They'll actually thread into our nuts. But the other question is how long of a bolt are we going to actually need for whatever we do? Okay, so let's talk about that very quickly. First thing we have to do is we have to go over and figure out what we're going to bolt down. So let's pretend that we're going to bolt this block down right here, and we're going to set this right there. Now, the next thing is we're going to have to take a scale or a ruler and make sure that you're on the appropriate scale here, because we have centimeters and we have inches. We're going to go down and we're going to look, and right here what I'm seeing is all the way at the bottom of this channel I have just about over 2 inches. Okay, so a 2-inch bolt is going to be perfect because, one, I don't want that bolt to run into the bottom of this extrusion. Notice this bolt doesn't wiggle. It's hitting the bottom of the extrusion, and if it's not tightening down underneath of the head on top of this, then the bolt may be tight, but your part may not be tight. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and rummage through our bolts very quickly and see if we have something at the appropriate length. We have 2 3/4, we have 5/8, and we have 1 1/8. It doesn't look like we have one specifically for this. It's probably in our box over here, but that's quite okay. But generally speaking, that's how you're going to measure those things up. If this thing is taller, it is the same process. We're going to come over here and make sure we're on the appropriate scale. We're going to measure up. That looks like 3 inches, and we have 3 1/4 over here. If we have something close but not exactly correct, what can be done is you're going to use some washers. Okay, so we go over here and we find some flat-headed washers, and we'll be able to stick those in there. Now, mind you, this is a spacer. Generally speaking, there's going to be something else that goes on top of that. For instance, our pillow block here. So if we want to put something on top of this block, not only are we going to measure what our block height is, but we're going to measure the whole assembly. And this whole assembly is about almost 3 3/4. So about 3 1/2 would be perfect for this right here. Just so happens this is 3 1/4. Not quite sure this is going to foot the bill, but again, you get the idea that you need to measure from the bottom of the slot and get the bolt that is the appropriate length, and you're going to be measuring it from underneath of the head. Okay, so 3 1/4 from underneath of the head for this particular bolt. Make sure that you're using a washer on top of that so the bolt head doesn't go down in, and you can go ahead and tighten up your assembly. Okay, now that we get an idea of how to actually tighten some things up on there, we're going to go ahead and move into a few other things that we're going to talk about. The other thing that we're going to talk about is inside of our labs, there is going to be a configuration for these rails here. You need to pay attention to the configuration. It's going to show you, generally speaking, how far this one is to be mounted, how close this one's going to be mounted, and then the next set of rails, how far away they're going to be. Okay, so generally on our first one, it's going to be lined up with this first edge, and then you're going to go from this edge and go back, and this one is set up at 7 1/2. That is particularly set up for a lab. So you're going to have to look at the diagram, then you're going to have to actually take the measurements. You're going to use your Allen wrenches here, okay, because it happens to be a button head cap screw, and we're going to loosen these things up. Now listen, they're going to get tight, so you're probably going to have to use the long bar here to get more leverage to loosen or tighten things. Once you get it loose, then you can turn it over where you don't have as much leverage, but it's much faster to actually turn the screw. All right, so you're going to make sure that those things are exactly where they're supposed to be. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about in this short video is when we start hooking up implements to motors. Generally, it's going to be a sprocket, it's going to be a pulley or a sheave, or it's going to be some other thing to get this motor to do some kind of work. And when we do that, we want to make sure that one, our bore size is correct for the shaft that we're using here, and two, we need to make sure that we actually have a key. What's a key? This is a key right here. Now, you can measure that by simply taking a set of calipers and measuring the width, measuring these keys. Most of the keys with these labs are going to be the same, but they need to fit in there. They shouldn't be too loose, but they should be able to move, which is really good. And then you need to make sure that the corresponding groove here matches with the key, and oftentimes you may have to hold the key into place as you are installing. Now once you get it to the depth that you're looking for, usually you want the entire shaft to be covered. Then you can take your Allen wrench and tighten up the set screw so that the pulley won't walk off. All right? Now, that's just a brief introduction about some of the hardware and how these things go together. Remember, these universal nuts here, they are they're very forgiving, but the bolt length has to be the right bolt length. So you need to make sure that you measure those things. And sometimes it's even very helpful to install the bolt and nut onto whatever you're going to put on there, and then as you bring it up close to the end of the assembly, you can fish this one in, and then you can fish the other one in, and then it's just easier to tighten it down. Otherwise, you're going to have to figure out how to tighten the bolt or fish in the bolt that's kind of underneath this motor. It makes it a little bit more difficult to do. So again, a few strategies for putting things together with this unit.